You're listening to episode 61 of the Comm Cafe. Mindfulness is the subject today. This is part 1 of 2, my interview with Dr. Parmjit Singh. Our conversation includes his transition from studying biology to then getting his master's and his PhD in psychology, going from studying the brain to studying how the mind works. Also, introducing mindfulness into universities. Teaching new courses, not textbook-based, real-life examples and exercises. Teaching students how to become better decision makers. In part 2, what is mindfulness and the 3 parts to mindfulness. So sit back and enjoy part 1 of my conversation with Dr. Parmjit Singh. All right, good afternoon. It's Dwayne Richards, the host of Comm Cafe, and this is a place for entrepreneurs, small business owners. We talk about mindfulness sometimes, specifically today, but it's really more about professional development, personal development, and bring on guests. And today, I will not disappoint you. I have a gentleman. He's actually a doctorate. So his name is Dr. Parmjit Singh. He has a PhD in sociology. He's a professor at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, in the health sciences, and also, this will be interesting, the business school. But today's discussion is going to be a combination of the around the brain, a little bit of science to make it so those analytical people like myself will understand what is mindfulness and the importance of meditation and how we're shifting from kind of the spiritual world into the corporate world. So welcome to the Comm Cafe.
Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you for having me, and hello everybody who is joining us right now. A little amendment, my PhD is in psychology. So it's in the ballpark, and psychology and sociology, they do coexist. So it's my pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to talk to you guys about the value of the mindfulness, not only as a professional asset, but also as a personal technique, which can actually do amazing things.
I think that's great. And then it is, for someone that's been introduced to it recently, like in the last 2 years, it is a fantastic tool. Meditation as a tool in our toolbox as part of our morning routine, evening routine, daily routine. Just do it. Do it when it feels good or when you really need it. All right. So how about share a little bit about I'll share a quick story about how we met first, and then I'll get you to share a little bit about your educational background. But the way we met is almost more than almost 2 years ago. My friend Sapinder invited me to her house because she was doing a workshop on the weekend around mindfulness. I'm like, wow, I know Sapinder quite well. I'm like, that sounds really interesting. And I showed up at Sapinder's house like I was going golfing. I showed up in like shorts and a golf shirt. And people ask like, where's your yoga mat? And I'm like, I didn't bring one. I didn't know that's what I thought. I thought we were going to as like a workshop. We were going to sit in a chair and learn about mindfulness. And we did that, but we also got down on the floor and I actually fell asleep. It was so energy and so powerful that was really my first experience in both understanding the science of why meditate and what it can do for our brain, but also how to physically do it. It was so thank you for being one of my first introductions to that side of the spiritual world or the science of that. And
I would add that actually the credit and the thank you goes to Sapinder for connecting us and actually allowing me to do things. And she is a wonderful friend, and I'm grateful for her. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. So how do we go from sort of the academic and into it's not two separate worlds, but into the importance of, and then adding and developing workshops and actually bringing in mindfulness even into the business school at one of the top universities in Canada?
I think in order to understand, we have to go back a little bit. So while I was actually, most of my studies were actually in India. So I did my undergrad in sciences, and I was very much interested in human mind from very beginning. For whatsoever reason, I read a lot of books during those times, considering how little resources we had. But this idea that you can access your mind, that you can make it your ally, or it can be your worst enemy, never went away from me. So I did my undergraduate in sciences, biology, chemistry, etc. But then it kept on coming, because on the sidelines of my academic reading, I kept on reading the psychology stuff, the stuff that was related to how to access your mind, how to become aware of what kind of thought processes you have, what kind of emotional landscape you have. So when it came for me to do the master's, I was actually planning to pursue microbiology. And for 2 months, I had prepared to take a test. So in India, you have to take a test in order to be considered for master's. So one of my friends who is in obstetricians back in India, at that time was actually doing his degree in medicine. And he told me, come over to me and I will teach you anything you need about microbiology, because that was one of the courses they had to take in the first and second years of their med school training. So I camped with him for 2 months, and he gave me Gray's Anatomy, all those big books to actually devour. And I enjoyed that aspect. I enjoyed reading what happens behind or beneath our skin, unbeknownst to us. But then when it came for me to apply, there was a very interesting conversation with him. And because he knew me for a very long time, and one day in the conversation, he said that, are you planning to live your life looking through a microscope? And that was a kind of innocuous, harmless comment he made, which made me sit and think that, yeah, I'm actually choosing a life in which I may have to look through the microscope for the rest of my life. And having said that, it doesn't mean that looking through a microscope is less valuable. But the fact of the matter, he actually followed up his first comment with the second. He said that you might be actually good at psychology. Why don't you try that? So that is something which I have been doing on the sidelines, that somebody comes along, the person who has been with you for a long period of time, who has trained you in some ways, and drops a ball in your head that, maybe there's a different road for you to take because you might be good at it. And that idea actually grabbed me, and I just realized the sudden possibility of doing something which I've always enjoyed doing, means doing a training in which I can have a formal training to how to access the mind. So I dropped everything out of my excitement, and I went and applied to psychology, and remembering that our university was the only place where anybody who had an undergraduate degree in sciences could go and apply to psychology. So I didn't have any formal background in psychology. So this was actually quite a spur of the moment decision, where I went, instead of applying to microbiology, I actually applied to psychology. So that's the only place I applied. Nowhere else. I'm not sure I did that. But to cut the long story short, I got in. So I had to actually appear for the test. So another interesting twist to the whole story is that once I applied, and once the deadlines for application went away, I got a letter from the university that I have to apply. I have to appear in a test, entrance test. So I'm actually now sitting and cursing myself, and I'm asking my friend how I'm going to actually clear the test, because I have no formal background in psychology. I enjoyed reading it. I loved exploring the literature about it, but I have no idea what exactly formal psychology works. And he very nonchalantly said, "Oh, okay, you will be all right." And I I scraped through it. So I always wonder that maybe I scraped through it because I had a informal knowledge. I had stuff to actually go through that. So that's how I actually ended up in psychology. Because I was very much, ever since the beginning, I was very much interested in human mind. And then I was more interested, I went to psychology with the intent to explore the applied aspect. How do you access your mind? How to know where to actually figure out your thought process, your cognitive processes, your emotional landscape, all those kind of things. But once I got into psychology, I realized the large part of psychology is very conceptual, it's very theoretical. There's not much scope for you to actually do a practical stuff in that. So that's how I ended up in applied psychology. That's how my PhD was in a more applied way. We had actually looked at the cognitive processes and the relationship between certain abilities sports athletes have and their mental skills. So that's how I actually literally got into psychology. And then I think there are different kind of doors open for me. I went to do my postdoc in Australia, where I worked for a very short period of time on endurance, the impact of music on endurance athletes, whether with or without the music. And then I came to Mac as another postdoc. And I worked for a little while here on expertise, that how people develop expertise, like, players who actually work in a field for a long period of time. They develop that kind of expertise, but there's a kind of minimum amount of time you need to spend on a skill level and work on it. But then during that process, I actually accidentally got into teaching, and I loved the process of teaching itself so much that I abandoned everything and stuck with it so much, because teaching allowed me to bring my professional training and personal interest together. Now, most of the courses I teach at Mac are actually custom built. They are not typical academic courses. There's no textbook courses. They actually pretty much synthesize the academic content with the practical application. That's what I do within health sciences. I teach programs courses such as called Deceptions in Decision Making, which actually brings together a variety of disciplines like economics, behavior economics, biology, evolutionary biology, psychology, all sort of things that are actually play in that course. Then I teach a course in business school. It's Mindful Leader, so which is actually academic as well as the professional aspect and the personal aspect of the technique. I teach a course in health sciences called Professional Transitions. It deals with the antsiness students actually experience when they are about in the third and fourth year, because academia is very sheltered. It does not mirror real life. So when even they must be the A student, but when it comes to graduation, everybody is actually feeling very antsy. What is going to happen when I step into the next part? And so this course deals with uncertainty, fear, future, all those kind of things, which we often worry about in the middle of the night, but there's no actually platform in academia to deal with that. So most of my courses are very custom made. Means it allows me to marry the academic interest I have and the personal stuff I do in my personal life. And some of the courses have a mindfulness built into it. So I could not ask any better, because this teaching allows me to actually do something which I love to do. It's an opportunity for me to actually sit with folks and talk about things and allow them to cross-pollinate and cross-examine their ideas and thoughts and emotions and see it in a larger landscape.
Wonderful. Is there a growing demand for this new generation of courses to be offered?
I tend to think that people are more interested in learning real life skills, because there's a beginning or growing realization among students that, sometime in order for you to be successful in today's very highly dynamical world, where there's no prototypical job market, one has to have skills which actually takes them beyond what is learned in the lecture halls. So these are the courses where they actually come in. So it allows them to dissect the academic content, understand it, but also understand how to apply it in the real life, because there could be sometime a vast dissonance or discrepancy between what is taught in academia and when people step into the real life. Because academia, sometimes that's how the scholarship works. They actually think about things, but life has its way of playing out. So when those two things come together, people often feel lost. So I tend to think there's actually growing demand for people to actually see these kind of courses where academia and real life meet in the lecture halls.
A common question either for now business owners or even for younger people is, how do I become a better decision maker? Do you get into teaching like decision making, like as opposed to just analytical thinkers and doing decision making analytically? But
in the course I teach, the deceptions in decision making, we actually deconstruct the nuts and bolt of the decision making process that goes on behind our eyes and between our ears, because the brain, the way it processes information is very interesting. And if we know, and if we come to know how it actually does that very efficiently and very productively, is also the way it's hijacked, because that's how the biases play out, how the marketers actually grab you when you are trying to buy something, or when people get attracted to the red sticker prices on a piece of thing they're looking for, or the loss aversion that it kicks in when people look at something and they think that they need to have it, and they feel that antsiness that if they didn't buy that thing, they are going to lose something. And I think that's the part of the decision-making process, the way brain process information. And what we actually love to do in our courses is actually, especially in the course I'm talking about, the decision-making, deceptions in decision-making, is to give students an opportunity to look for those kind of things in their outside world. So students will do something. For example, last week we were talking about actually deceptions in education. How the standardization process has actually become entirely different than how it was actually visualized in the beginning. The standardized tests and all those kind of SATs and LSATs and all those kind of things. And the very process which was meant to help people is now being used to actually discriminate or diversify and to rank people, which have its own implications when you start to look at it. Because when we rank people, we don't rank people on the usefulness of the people. We rank people in relation to what they're able to regurgitate. For example, if I'm an instructor and if I put together an exam, anybody who actually do well in exam, I'm going to rank them better. But does it mean that that's how they're ranked really in real life? That's actually, that's not true at all. But when people get grades, they actually start to identify with them. So there's an implication of that part. So when somebody gets a grade A, they tend to think they're actually A as a person. And the person who gets B tend to think. And this is where the actually tricky part is. So this week, we are actually going to talk about deceptions in healthcare, how things, get crazy, especially when we start thinking about certain conditions, lifestyle conditions, how it actually come to impact us. So we do give actually students an opportunity to think about how they make decision. And especially I will give them home assignments. So, okay, for this week, you have a whole week to figure out why do you make certain decisions. Just notice it. Just, when you go to Tim Hortons and pick a cookie instead of a donut, what really is going on in your mind? You don't have to deconstruct. Just simple process of being aware of can be very telling to the whole process how we make decisions. Or when you go shopping, or when you feel antsy, what you do? You grab a chocolate, or you go shopping, or you just curl up with a book in the bed. And these are the things which allows us to actually become aware of the process. Large part of the brain processings are very actually at a very unconscious level. We actually don't even know how it processes information. But I think once that information becomes conscious, and if we are aware of it, it can give us a window into how to choose it. So the first step to me, even though a lot of processing happens at unconscious level, is that before the decision has to be carried out, it has to come to the conscious stage. And if we are aware enough of that, we can become aware that before you pick that red sticker shirt, off the shelf, you become aware of that. I have many of those shirts in my closet. That kind of thing can allow you to short circuit the automatic behaviors. My tendency and my intent for teaching these courses is allow students to actually use the scientific data and the personal awareness and use it as a kind of a model to self-emulate, to self-improve, whether it's in the context of the personal life or in the professional life, because that's exactly the way an entrepreneur makes a decision or a CEO makes a decision. It's essentially the same thing. We know research from the business world is showing that people who are more self-aware tend to make better leaders because they're able to see things in a way which is not possible if you're not self-aware.
Self-awareness. Now, my interview with Dr. Parmjit went so long, I had to divide it into 2 pieces. So much great content. Yeah, stay tuned. Part 2 is here. It is mindfulness and the 3 components of mindfulness. The first part is paying attention. The second, not reacting. And the third, understanding everything is temporary. Now, listen to episode 62 for part 2 of my interview with Dr. Parmjit Singh.